with Overclockers Club. Today we've got a new case from a new company. Now this company, if you can see the text there, it's Mean It. Now I'd never heard of this company before, so I'm always interested to see a new product from a new company. Now this is the 5 PM, and it's actually the ARC Series R for red of course. And we'll talk about some of the other cases in this series a little later here. But one of the cool things about this, before I even get it out of the box, is the motherboard compatibility. Now this one runs the full gamut. We go from a mini ITX all the way up to an extended ETX, which is a pretty big motherboard. So to get that into a mid-size case is really quite remarkable. So we'll get it out of the box and take a look and see what it looks like. So now we can talk about some of the exterior features of the case. The obvious one here are the glass side panels. And these are 5mm thick panels. I want to point that out. A lot of your other cases that you buy will have 4mm thick panels. They're lighter, but they're not quite as robust. So the first thing you'll notice when you take these side panels off is they've got some beef to them there, which is a good thing. Now we'll look at the front of the case here. This front panel, and actually this pops off quite easily. This smoke glass front panel, we've got perimeter venting around the glass, so that's where the air intake comes in when the fans are on. It pulls air through that so that it can push it into the case. We'll just pop that back on there. And the I/O panel here is what we're going to talk about next. We have our standard power button here on the top center. We have the reset button, a couple of USB 3.0 ports, a couple of USB 2.0 ports. Then we have a microphone, headphone jack, and then across here we have 3 buttons for fan control, so you can speed the fans up, slow them down. Nice feature. Across the top here we have this really nice mesh filter panel that comes off. It's flexible and it has magnets around the perimeter, so it just attaches right to the top of the case very easily. And if we look at the top of the case, we have provisions, mounting provisions for 3 fans. You can go with 3 120mm fans or 2 140mm fans, and it's heavily meshed to allow for sufficient airflow. So if you really want to get the air flowing, you can leave this panel off. If you're not quite as concerned with airflow, you want to keep dust out a little more, you can put this panel on top. Now, looking at the bottom of the case, you'll see that we have another filter panel. This is for your power supply. Keeps the dust from being sucked into the intake on your power supply. So that pops in and out very easily, very conveniently. We've got about 1 inch of clearance on the bottom of the case. The feet push you about 1 inch off the ground, so if you put it on carpet, you can still get some airflow there under the case, which is important for your power supply. Looking at the back of the case, of course, we have a 120mm rear exhaust fan. Now this is lighted just like the front fan, so this should be a really cool lighting effect when we get it powered up. We have our I/O opening here for the back of the motherboard. We have our 7 slots across the back here. These are your I/O expansion slots. And then at the bottom is the opening for the power supply, of course. And then we have a little extra mesh here to get airflow in and out. And we can also go with a 140mm rear exhaust fan too if we like. Now, we'll go ahead and get the panels off and take a look inside. We got the side panels off now, and I can tell you this case is considerably lighter without the heavy glass panels on there. But talking about the fan coverage, we've got the 3 120mm included front fans. We also have the ability to put 3 more fans on top, and then we have 1 120mm included rear fan. So you've got a total of 7 fans that you can put on this case. And there's a little fan controller here I'll show you here in a moment. We have a shrouded power supply area here. This covers, some people like them, some people don't. The good thing is that you cover up all your wiring. When you do your cable routing, all that stuff can be stashed away so you get it out of the way. Bad thing is if you have a really nice power supply you want to show off, it's kind of covered up. Now we do have the glass back panel here, so you will be able to see it from the rear if you wanted to. Now, we'll flip the case around here to this side. We do have 3 little trays for your solid state drives, which is nice, and they are removable. We have plastic trays here for your regular standard hard drives, but they also have provisions for solid state drives. So if you wanted to, you could put as many as 5 solid state drives in here. Here's the hardware box. We'll take a look at that here in a moment. Here's our cables. There's your USB 3.0 plug that goes into the motherboard. We do have plenty of room here. If you look at your power supply would go here in the back. We do have a lot of nice room though for cable routing, and that's a big plus. I do like that. Another nice feature, speaking of cable routing, we have these plastic shrouds here that are removable that also go a long way to covering all of your cables. So we not only can cover them from the bottom, we can cover them from the sides here. So your cable exposure is really going to be minimized with this case. So even though it's a small mid-tower case, it really does have a lot of cool features. I forgot to point out there's also a nice cool rubber grommet here also to hide your cabling that you're coming up to the front of the motherboard. Or if you want to drop the power cables for your GPU, you can drop them straight through that grommet. Now, on the back of the case here, this little circuit board here is where you'll plug in 2 additional fans on the top header, and then we actually have a little plug here. Here it is. We can go with the 3rd one. So you can add 3 extra fans that can be controlled by your fan controller buttons up here. That's a really nice feature. And here's your SATA power to power this circuit board. So you plug that into one of your SATA sockets on your power supply. And we'll go ahead and get the motherboard in here, get all the case dressed out and see what it looks like when we power it up. Now I want to talk in a little more detail about this little guy right here. This board is a fan controller board. I used to see these on high-end cases, and now I'm starting to see it trickle down into more affordable cases. So what we've got here are 6 positions, and we're using 4 of them. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then 4 here at the top. So the case has 4 fans. We're using 4 positions. We have 6 total, so we have 2 empty ones. So those could be used, for example, if you wanted to put a couple of fans up here at the top. If you're using liquid cooling, or you just want a little extra case ventilation, that's where you could plug those fans in, if you wanted to. Now, the case does have fan speed controllers here, so you can go to high, auto, low, or off and turn them off completely. On the auto feature, what that does, I'll explain that. This socket right here, or this plug I should say, plugs into the CPU fan header socket on the motherboard. So when your CPU fan header puts out a command to go faster or slower, it will control all the fans that are plugged in if you want to use this feature. And it also has another little socket here. This guy is to plug your CPU fan into if you want to have it also controlled by the CPU fan header, the signal that comes from there. And usually there's software with the motherboard, or you get into the BIOS and you can also modify your fan speeds too. And that information is really called out right here. It kind of explains how all that works in the instructions, and then it shows you what all the sockets do and what their functions are. So I think they've done a really good job of implementing this. I played around with it a little bit and it seems to work just fine. So we've got the motherboard assembled to the case. A couple things I'll talk about. I'll have to show you in a little more detail and more of a close-up. But we've got our 3 solid-state drive trays here that are easily detachable. We also have lots of nice room here behind the power supply to stash your cables, and that's a really nice way to handle your cable management. A lot of times in a smaller case especially, your cables are just everywhere, and it's really hard to get the back cover on. There's nowhere to put the cables. But here with the space, not really a problem. And again, inside the power supply shroud, which enables you to cover all those messy cables, get them out of the way, improve your cable management. We also have a little pump base here if you want to do liquid cooling. And we have a really cool plastic cover here. It goes a long way also towards cable routing and cleanup. And we'll get some close-ups of that here in just a moment. All right, let's take a look at the inside of the case. First thing you see is this big power supply shroud that I mentioned earlier. A lot of people have a love-hate relationship with these. I'm seeing them more and more in cases. They are sometimes removable. This one is actually riveted in, so it's not going anywhere. So if you have a fancy power supply, it will remain covered up. You do not have the option to show it off. However, you do have something that covers up the cable clutter. So your cable management looks so much cleaner. We have this nice rubber grommet here that the lines, the power supply or power feeds for your GPU can come up through there, as well as the lines here for your I/O for your motherboard control. We have a little pump base here that is detachable. If you're going to go with liquid cooling, you can mount the pump there. Another thing I really like is this plastic shroud here. And this is really nice because what it does, I'll take this little screw out. What it does is it helps hide all of these cables coming in, your main power cable coming in for the motherboard, all of your SATA cables, all that stuff can be hidden here by this little guy. We'll put him in later. Looking at the front, we have our 3 fans. I love these fans too. You should see these things when we get them when we get the case powered up. But we have room here for up to a 360 millimeter front radiator for liquid cooling. In the top of the case, if I can get a good shot here, we also have room for a 360 millimeter top radiator if you wanted to go that route. Now the other thing I like is we have space here. If you look between the top of the motherboard and the top of the case, we have room in there to actually get a radiator and 2 fans, or 3 fans if you use a 360 millimeter radiator. So that is nice. They actually left you some room. And the other good thing is here, they left you some room here for this opening to get your CPU power cable in there at the back corner. I can't tell you how many times I've busted knuckles trying to get that attached or detached. It's not easy. And once the motherboard's in there, you don't have any choice but to take the motherboard back out. Now, we'll flip the case around again here and we'll look. The other thing I like is we have plenty of rectangular openings again for routing cables. We have a couple of ones, nice rectangular openings here on the side. They don't have rubber grommets on there, and I don't know that that's really a deal breaker or anything I would be too concerned about. Some cases go grommet crazy and have grommets everywhere. Others don't, but I think we're okay with this case. Again, we have plenty of space down here to stuff your cables if you don't have a modular power supply, which this one is not. If you're lucky enough to have a modular power supply, you can get rid of the cables that don't need to go along for a ride, and you don't have nearly as much cable clutter. So, we will go ahead and get this case put back together and get the power to it and start to do our thermal testing. Okay, so we have the thermal imaging camera fired up here. We look at the side of the case. Since we have all this glass, there is a lot of reflection, so sometimes it's a little hard to really key in there and get a good reading, but you can see it's pretty much 25, 26 degrees around the side, around the front. You can see the fans there. And we go across the top and we're about 26 degrees or so. And then we'll wrap around here to the back. Now we have the rear exhaust fan. We can see a little more temperature there. And again, the case is at idle. We don't really have a load on it, so these are just your normal temperatures. There's the graphics card, and we come down here to the power supply. So you can see the temperatures there around 30, 31, 32. Now we put the case under a load, and again, you can see there's a lot of reflection on the side glass. But with the case under a load, we're going to see some temperature increases here, particularly as we come around to the back of the case. Now we look at the top of the case. We don't really see a whole lot of temperature difference till we get toward the back, and that's where the heat really gets concentrated as the rear exhaust fan pulls that heat out of the back of the case. And we'll see here that our temperatures are a little higher here. We're closer to 37, 38 degrees right there at the exhaust. And then we come down here and look at the graphics card. Of course, there's not a whole lot going on there. And then we roll down here to the power supply. Of course, with the case under a load now, it's no surprise to see that we have a little higher temperature there, 40 degrees C, right in that neighborhood. So that's the thermal imaging. All right, the thermal testing for this case looked really good. No surprises for a case this size, really nothing out of the ordinary. Next thing I want to talk about is the pricing. You can find this case at Newegg for about $120 right now. You might find it a little cheaper with some sales, but for a case with this feature set and the quality of build that I see here, I think we're right at the sweet spot. Now, as for liquid cooling options, we do have quite a few here, and I really like the fact that you can get up to a 360 millimeter radiator on top. You can also put up to a 360 millimeter radiator in the front. So if you want to go liquid cooling, you can really put a large radiator in here. You can also put 2 140 millimeter fans or 3 120 millimeter fans across the top. If for no other reason, if you just want some extra case ventilation at the top. Now, the other things I like about this case are the glass panels. That really sets this case out. I'm seeing glass panels more and more common now on cases. It used to be only on the high-end cases, but I'm seeing them also on smaller cases now and less expensive cases. What do I like about the glass? I love the way it's smoked. It almost looks like it's painted black, a real glossy black, but they're actually smoked. And you might be concerned that, well, is that going to allow the wiring, the mess of the wiring harnesses and the cables to show through? And you really don't have to worry about it because this is dark enough that you can't really see what's going on back there. You can see through it, but you can't really see the details. The same thing here looking inside the case. You can see things that are lit up, but as far as the fine details, you can't really see what's going on. And I really like that. In the front, we have the 3 120 millimeter fans with a cool red ring around them. Love that lighting effect. We also have one of those little guys here in the back here, another 120 millimeter fan. So, when we look at this case, we have a really great feature set which allows the case to handle a range of motherboards from a mini ITX, which is on the small end, all the way up to an eATX, which is an extended ATX, a very large motherboard. So you can cover just about any motherboard you could buy and it would fit in this case. So, this is the 5 PM from Meanit Gaming ATX Mid-Tower case. This is Chris from Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching.